All right. So state abbreviator, I'm going to go through the motions, fork, clone, etc. So I'm just going to fork it over to my local GitHub and clone it down and then read the README. Did anybody have any specific questions about a state abbreviator before I jump into it? No? All right, let's see. All right, so I cloned it down, or I'm sorry, forked it over. Now I'm going to clone it down to my GitHub. I'm in the Mike challenges. I can get clone it down. I'm going to clear the screen. Then I'm going to code, or I'm going to cd into state abbreviator, and then I'm going to open this up in a new VS Code window. Let me zoom in a little bit. There. Okay. So let's kind of just read this challenge. All right, let's continue experimenting with state props and inputs and transforming arrays. Okay. So scaffold the app using create React app, and then move state data directory into the root of this repo, which is in our source directory. Code outside of the source directory isn't compiled. So that's why we also need all of our assets, such as images, CSS, inside of the source directory, because it's not compiled. And then release 2, import the state data from state data index and use it to construct a UI. The UI must include a select input drop-down menu that contains a list of US states and a component that displays the abbreviation of the selected US state once you select the state from that drop-down. All right, so I've got the select drop-down. All right, so now I have to create a React app, and this is going to take a long time because my computer, for whatever reason, takes a long time to create a React app. So npx create React app, and let's just call it state abbreviator, or let's just call it state app.
Hey, Tom, could we add Tommy to the breakout room?
Oh, yep. Where is he? How do I? Let me stop sharing real quick and see if I can do that real quick. Breakout rooms. All right. That work? Tommy, are you in there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no, you're good. All right, now let me share my screen again. So I forked it, I cloned it down. Now I just have to create a React app. I'm just going to call this a React app called state abbrev and click enter. And this is going to take quite a little while. What questions do you have about state abbreviator or just React in general? Is there something that you kind of want me to go over, explicitly focus on? Is there any concept that you're having a little trouble wrapping your head around?
States and props for me.
Okay.
Same.
State, same? All right.
I'm just kind of having trouble like understanding like the full their full use case and how to implement it.
Okay. So I like to think, well, if you think of React app, I don't want to say like a tree, but yeah, kind of like a tree or like a class. So a property is an attribute that is inherited from a parent component. And every single child component has props. Now, depending on what data is contained in the props, is totally up to the parent component and up to you as a user as what you actually want to pass down to a child component. And it's actually, props is a reserved keyword. And then state is an also reserved keyword for class-based components. State is just data that is local to the given component. So if you think of like classes, props is stuff that is inherited down from a parent component. And then state is like data that you define within the component. But we'll walk through it with this challenge.
Tom, you said state is data local to the given, what was the last part of that?
To the local component.
Got you, okay.
Yep. And state is, there's explicit, like state is a reserved keyword. So when you define state, it's literally an object, and you can access it by calling this dot state with regards to in class-based components. In functional-based components, you can call it whatever you want, just like you would like a normal variable. But in order to create a state in a functional-based component, you have to use the use state hook to create a state. But we'll get into that. All right. Am I still recording? Does it say I'm recording? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, let's look at it. All right, scaffold using create react app, move the state data directory into the root directory. So inside my state abbreviation, react app, I can move this state data into here. So there we go. Inside my source, I've got my state data, which is literally just an index, which is an array of objects. Each object has a name key with that name of the state and an alpha -2, which is just the alpha state abbreviated characters of the state. So I'm going to clear this. I'm going to list everything out. I'm going to cd in the state abbreviation app. And now I'm just going to Python. I'm going to npm start to actually start this. All right, so import. All right, and use it to construct a UI. The UI must include a select input drop-down menu that contains a list of US states. So, all right, so inside of my app.js, this is everything that just comes pre-built, comes with React. The first thing I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna delete everything in there, and I'm gonna also delete the logo because I don't need that. I'm just gonna make sure everything's still working. Okay, and here's my app. There's nothing being displayed here. I can even say like, give some directions. H1, select state from drop down menu. I just wanna make sure that works. All right, select state from drop down menu. Now in here it says, use it, so use this index, this data right here to construct a UI using a select input or select dropdown or input dropdown. So how do we create a dropdown select in HTML or React? Does anybody know?
It's like a list or a form with an unordered list in it.
So
Select tag?
yeah, so we can say like how to create a select drop down in HTML. All right, so we have the select tag. All right, so I'm just gonna literally copy this over. First, I just want to try it out just to make sure I totally understand it. It looks like there's a form here, and we have this and a submit. Oh, cool, whatever. I'm gonna just refresh that. So pretty much what we actually need is just the select portion. And I'm just gonna copy this over here. All right. And see what this looks like. All right, cool. We have Volvo, Saab, and Audi. All right. So with that, what we want to do is we don't really need this information anymore. We want to have like 50 select drop downs of all the states. but it's not really scalable or that efficient to create 50 options from scratch. So one way we can do that is import this data into our app.js file and use that state data array. So I can say like import state data from state data. And I can see if this is in fact imported correctly, but I'm just going to console log the state data and open up my console log, or open up my console, and I can see an array of states. What questions do you have so far about importing the state data and this select drop down so far?
That
Did I see that
data-
state data file?
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm exporting default, and it's literally just an array of objects.
Could you check it? Would it be feasible to have that array inside our app.js? I know like it would make no sense and it would be terrible design, but is there a significance to putting it in the state data folder?
Just like separations, because we might want to use this at some other point in our application just to keep our data separate in general.
Okay.
And in real life, you might have a database of all the states or something like that, and you'd be making an API call to some database somewhere and getting this data. So it won't be local to your component generally for anywhere else. So you won't be like having this as a local variable inside your component. So it's good to extract that data out somewhere else. Dan, can I help answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Dylan, did you have a question?
Yeah, the export default, is that just a neat way of doing it? Do you have to do it that way, or could you just make a file with just one variable in it that's equal to this crazy big array, and then when you import it, you just have to say import this from this variable from here and use it that way, or is export default the way to go?
Export default is the only way to do it, I believe. I don't think you can have access to like JavaScript variables or other kinds of data without exporting it first.
Got it.
With export default, is that what's giving us the ability to just console log state data, even though it's never explicitly named?
So yeah, so I'm actually importing it from, so I'm importing whatever this, that's gonna fuck it up. Whatever this data is. So I'm importing this array from state data, and I'm just calling it state data. I can call this anything I want. Anything. And if I do that, it's the same thing. So
would it still work that way if you had multiple JavaScript files inside the state data?
So if I had multiple JavaScript files within
State data?
I think it, no, I think I'd have to, so when you export anything, or I'm sorry, when you export, I could be wrong, and I don't want to, when you export from a directory, it defaults looking into an index.js file. So if I had multiple files, it's going to default looking into the index first. So if I think if I call this like index,
so you're not supposed to have more than one file in there anyways.
Right. I mean, you can, except you'd have to explicitly say like import like index. And I could do this as well, and this is still going to work.
Okay.
But since it is an index JS file, it defaults to looking in there.
Okay. Yeah. Just the magic that's happening by just being able to name import anything, and then be able to console log it. That was mystifying me.
Gotcha. And I could also like like anything equals this, and at the very bottom do module dot exports. Or I'm sorry, is it module dot exports? Anything?
Oh, so that's like when we were doing the unit tests.
I think this might work. Yeah. Or I can also, I believe, do this. So yeah. So you can pretty much do whatever you want. Just, I'm just gonna go back.
And what is the index file used for normally?
It's just the default entry point into a module.
Okay.
I'm going to go back to just calling the state data because that's in fact what this variable is or what this data is. All right. So now we have access to the state data, which is an array of objects. So instead of, again, listing 50 of these option tags, I can create a method that literally just says like const display drop down, and I'm going to say like let state objects is an empty array, and I can do state data dot map. So I'm going to map through each object, and I'm just going to console log each object. So I'm going to say the data and the index. So if you look at JavaScript map function, or is it W3 schools? That's not a good. So here's an example for the syntax. Map takes in callback, which the first value is the current value, and then it also can take in an index or the entire, or another value. So I'm taking in the data, which is the actual object, as well as the index. So if I just console log the data right there, and in place of here, I'm going to use call display dropdown and invoke it. And it's not going to display anything. I just kind of want to show you where did it go? Oh, it's 8,000. I want to go to 3,000. So I've displayed every single Alaska. So now I can actually return the state objects. I want to push in that option value like so. But instead of value, I want to pass in the data slash, what is this? I'm going to do I want to pass in the data, this alpha 2 keyword, because that's the actual value that I want. And instead of what I actually want to show up on the screen is the name. So I can say data name. So I'm literally pushing these option tags with the value equal to the 2 characters, the abbreviation, and then what I actually want to show up on the screen in the select dropdown is the actual name of the state. At the very end, I can return the state objects. Just look at this. So here we go. What questions do you have about how I'm doing this?
Do we need the index there, or is that?
Yep.
optional?
So if you look over here, I'm going to get a little warning. Each child in a list should have a unique key property. So each key should be unique. So inside it, and that's referencing each option tag needs a key value that is unique. And what's unique about each option is that it has a unique index. So if I come back here, it's going to reload. Now I don't get that error anymore. And if I look at the components, I can't even, yeah, you probably can't even see that part. But if you look at this div, you can see the select and then all the options. All right.
Would it be bad practice to just also set the key as like alpha 2, for example?
I mean, you can't, I think you can do that and it should still work. Yeah, I mean, that's fine as well. As long as it's unique to each option. But I just wanted to use the index just because why not? So now when I click like Idaho or New York, I want it to display the state abbreviation for that. So let's look over here. I'm just going to look at select dropdowns. See select. I want to see if one has a specific on change event listener for select dropdown. Do I have an on change? Yeah, this is in raw HTML and CSX or CSS. Anyway, I'm going to create a select drop on change event listener. So I could say like on change. I want it to like console log selected. Just see if this actually works. So when I on change, every time I select something, it executes that function. So with that, if I have an on change event listener, I can create another function called handle change that takes in an event and does something like console log event. Let's just do that right now. So instead of console logging selected, I'm just gonna console log the event. All right, so if I refresh that and click like Illinois, I get this event, and I can see down here, event.target. So I can see all this stuff. Now what if I do like event dot value and refresh it? Undefined, still undefined, blah, blah, blah. What if I do event dot target dot value? Oop. There we go. Kansas, that's not right. I'm gonna fix that, Kansas. So now I'm actually selecting the state, and it's creating, it's console logging the state abbreviation version of that. And I'm doing that in this handle change function that takes in the event, and I'm able to access whatever option I select by doing event.target.value. And so every time I select and like click on the state, it's an on change event handler, so something changed. So it executes this handle change method, takes in the event, event.target.value. What questions do you have so far? Nothing?
I have a quick one with the return state ops dot push. That map, the map is like looping through that array of objects, and then you're returning.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So if I didn't have this return statement, it'd probably throw an error, because I think the way the map method works is it needs to return something.
Okay.
But you can check it out. Oh yeah, I don't want W3 schools, but yeah. All right, so after I extract the state abbreviation by event.target.value, I can, declare some state. So I can say import, I'm in a functional component, use state from React. And at the very top, I can const, I can say like state, what should I call it? Selected state and set selected state equals use state, and the initial value is null. So down here, I can say like I can use a ternary or something else to display the selected state. So I can say like selected state. If that's true, then display a paragraph of the selected state. And inside my onChange event handler, I can set selected state to event.target.value. So in my handle change, I'm setting state, I'm updating my state. I can't just access state and change this variable directly. So I need this set selected state method to update the state to the current value that I'm selected. So if I come over here and I refresh, nothing's showing up because the initial state value is null. And if I come down here, if selected state is true, it'll show the selected state in a p tag. Let's actually make that an h1 tag. Else, if it's false and null is falsy, it won't display anything. Does anybody have any questions so far? So if I come over here and I select Illinois, it shows up. Montana shows up. So what questions do you have so far about getting that logic to work? All right, so we're almost there. So let's look back at here. It says a component that displays the abbreviation of the selected state once you select it. So right now, this single app component is doing a lot. I just want to create a component that displays the state. So in here, inside my source, I can create another directory called components. And then I can probably create another called state. And then create a file in the state directory called state.js. And I can make a functional based component called state. I'm going to split the screen over here. So instead of displaying this, I'm going to display this is the selected state component. And then instead of here, I'm going to display the state. Let's see if I can do that. And it looks like it's already imported up here automatically for me. So now if I come back here, when I select a state, it's going to show the component. Because the initial value is null, so it doesn't display it. And then once I select it, comes into here, sets the selected state value to whatever I selected in the select dropdown. So now it's no longer null. That means it's true. Now then it's going to display the state component, which just displays this h1 tag that this is the selected state component. But so now props, I can pass data into this component from the app.js component or the parent component. And this is the parent component because I'm rendering the state component within the app.js or the app component. So I can actually pass this down. I can call this whatever I want. I can say selected state. This is a prop that I'm going to be passing down into the state component. And I can set that equal to the selected state from the app.js's state. And it's good just to keep these kind of called the same thing, just because you don't want naming to just change randomly throughout components because you might get confused. So now inside my state component, I can pass in props because again, it's just a function. And I can console log props just to see what my props are in my state component. So if I refresh it and I click Delaware, here are my props. It's got a key of selected state and the value is DE. What questions do you have so far about passing props down from a parent component to its child component? And I can call this prop whatever I want. Whatever I want, if I refresh it, and there it goes. The key is whatever I want. But it's good just to keep, if I'm passing data down, so for example, I'm passing state in the app component, which is just called selected state. If I'm passing it down to another component, which I am, passing it down to the state component, I should keep those called the same thing, just to not confuse future developers. Now at the very end, I can actually display the selected state by doing props dot selected state, like so. If I refresh it, there we go. What questions do you have?
I have a question about like organizing React components, I guess. So you could also break up your form, your select form into components if you wanted to as well, right? And have the form as a component and all the options as a other component, and then insert them and reuse that drop down over and over. When we're thinking about programs like that, do we want to do that every time we do something, or how should we think of?
So, yeah, you kind of want your functions, or I'm sorry, your components to be dynamic. So for like a select dropdown, you might want to create a select dropdown component that accepts data, like state data, as a property that you can render. But you just have to kind of make sure that all the data that you're passing in looks exactly like this. Not necessarily name, Florida, or like, you should make sure that like the data is pretty much very similar that you're passing into that component.
Where we have const selected state and set selected state, what is that? Only room for 2 options in that array? Is that how it will always be? Will you ever have more than 2?
Nope. So
Okay.
use state method is
Yeah.
a built-in method from React, and it returns 2 values: the initial value of the state, as well as another method to update the state.
Okay, so it's pretty common practice to have them similar and just put set in front of the second name.
Yep.
Gotcha.
All right. And in here, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Tom. Is it okay to think of selected state and set selected state like key values?
Selected state and set selected state as key values? No, I would say selected state is the actual state of some data in the component, and set selected state is a method used, or a function used, to update this value.
Okay, and then use state?
Use state is just another, it's a hook, but it's just a function that takes in an initial value of the selected state output.
Okay.
So use state is unique in that it returns 2 values: the initial state right here, and then another method, it returns another method to update this value.
Okay. Got it.
What's that?
No, just that's a no. It's just there's a lot there to process, but it makes more sense than it did 30 seconds ago, at least. I'm just gonna have to start playing around with it.
Yeah. So this is pretty much how it always will look like the syntax of it, with the use state and the initial value of whatever state you want. And the second value in the array is the method to update this value.
Okay, like we're using on line 18, because we're assigning the value.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, and what would happen? Obviously, this would be wrong, but what would happen if you did on line 18 select state as your
Like-
method?
Select state
Yeah, selected state. Yep.
like that, and as a method, or just say like equals event dot target dot value.
Yeah, is that a way of doing it or no?
No, that's going to throw a lot of bugs. If it does work, it's not scalable. So there it goes. Assignment to a constant variable. So I declared this as a const. If I made this a let, which isn't good, it might work. Yeah, so it doesn't even work because you can't change this directly. You need a method to update it.
Okay.
So state takes in props. You can extract this even further by doing const. By grabbing the selected state right here, equals props. And then instead of props dot selected state, you can just do selected state. And then it should still work. You can even go further than this, but you don't necessarily need to. You can even delete that and then just do selected state like that. So you're only extracting the selected state from the props object. It should still work. But don't worry about all that because you don't necessarily need to do all that. All right. Any more questions?
So Tom, I just want to make sure. So when we use state is when we want to make sure that a change can be displayed at the, or can be rendered, something like that.
So the useState method is explicitly used to change the state of the component. So, and you can, depending on what you want, you can change, depending if you want to change the state, you can render different things on the screen, depending on the value of state, which we are down here. So the selected state is state for this component. And depending on this value, we're going to display this state component.
Got it. And this will be the parent, right?
Say that one more time.
Be like the parent function. Like I mean, like for the prop. So I'm just changing the subject here a little bit, but I'm just trying to understand props too. So from app, you transfer all the information to state using props, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yep. And the props I'm passing into the state component is just this little selected state property, which is the value of the app, the parent component's state.
All right. Thank you.
Sorry if I missed this, but is the select or the state value, is that always going to be like relatively simple, like one value, or will it ever be like a collection of values?
It could be an array of values, but like you could have multiple states, like have a bunch of different data, and that's pretty typical. Not pretty typical, but yeah, it will occur.
So it would be better to create multiple state variables instead of like trying to make a list usually.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And this is just for functional components. If I can convert this to a class component, if you guys want, just kind of show you what that looks like. Let me know if you want me to do that. Otherwise, we can stop the recording.
Question about
Yep.
target value. I think you already. Yeah. So is it something comes with set selected state?
No, so this event, anytime, I don't know specifically where it comes from. Essentially, anytime something changes, you can pass in what event object is changed in like HTML. So if
Okay.
I do
What about target and value?
target is a
Target.
keyword or is a key on the event object.
Okay. So is it something we should know, or we should search, or we should, like?
So pretty much anytime you do, you'll be seeing this a lot, event.target.value a lot when you're using forms and
Okay.
everything like that. So when you're submitting a form, you'll be passing in event as an argument, and you'll be able to access
Okay.
data in the form or the select dropdown. So you'll be encountering this a lot.
So if we wanted to move the dropdown to its own component, we would also take with it the state and the handle change function and what it's and the displaying thing.
So I have a question for you. Would you want to move this entire thing to a new component? Or just this part?
Oh, if it was the entire thing.
If it was the entire thing, now you'll get into some, like it's possible, but you're going to have to pass down this handle change method as well into the select dropdown component that you're creating, because you're going to need to update the parent component state, which is then going to have to be passed into this state. So we can try to do that if you want right now.
That's okay. No one else had that question. I was just trying to think about it.
Yeah.
But
So
off the top of your head, if we did move it over, we'd basically only be putting component inside of the app. Is that right?
yeah. So hold on, I'm just gonna forgot how to do this. How do I comment this out? Nope. So yeah, if you had like a select drop down component right here, right? You would have to pass in, obviously, all this information would be going into this component, but you'd have to pass down this handle change as a property. Because you're going to have to want to update the app component state from the select dropdown component state.
Oh, okay. And that's what you mean when you keep saying that we have to keep track of our states.
Yeah.
Is that you can only change it like where you're physically changing it on the website. Is that right?
So you can change state, like I can change this app.js's state from a child component state or from a child component. I can do that, but yeah, but I'm using a property, which is a method right here to change the state. We're going to get into this in news site, which is like a multi-day challenge where we're going to be passing around methods like this to update parent component state and all that. So again, state is just confined to this component, like that component, but you can actually change the state of this local component from another component. It's possible to do that.
All right. I will wait for that lesson. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you push this?
Oh yeah.
Thanks.
All right. So with that, I will